the ballot, we see that there are actually 5 candidates on the ballot, and yet we only hear from 2 of them. And there are actually 6 parties in California, but one of those parties, the American Independents, decided to make Trump and Pence their own candidate. And that's why we have only 5 this year. But nevertheless, because there are 5 candidates on the ballot, I think it's incumbent upon all voters, actually, to know something about what each and every one of those candidates or those tickets actually have to say. And that's why we have this forum here. And we're honored today to have the spokespersons for the 3 excluded candidates in the national in the races in California. So at my far left is Robert Imhoff. So Robert Imhoff is representing Gary Johnson of the Libertarian Party, and I would say that all of the presidential candidates this year are people who are very experienced politically. They have all run for political office before. The next to the left is Nathalie Hrizi, and she is representing Gloria Riva of the Peace and Freedom Party. And Gloria Riva has been running for office for as long as I can remember. And and she's actually based here in San Francisco with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And next is Sandy Perry. Sandy Perry is representing Jill Stein of the Green Party. And I know there are many supporters of the Green Party here. And Jill Stein this is her 2nd time running for president. And I think you've been hearing quite a bit about some of these candidates. And because of the situation in the presidential race this year, because there's so much concern about the 2 major candidates, I think that there's a rise in the poll showings for the 3rd-party candidates. Gary Johnson is running about 7 or 8%. Jill Stein is 3 or 4%, and because these are 2 national campaigns. Peace and Freedom, of course, is mainly a California party, and that's why it doesn't show up that much. But it stands very strong on the issues. So that's why we're here today. So now let me introduce our co-moderators. So Jack Spica, as I mentioned before, from AS, Associated Students of San Jose State University, and Nassim Nouri, who's a community activist and helped us with some of the progressive election forums that we just had. So with that, I will turn it over to our moderators and take it away.
Thank you very much, Sharad. Thank you all for being here. We're very lucky to have our spokespeople, so I'd like to also thank you very much for spending your time with us. We're going to start with a question. I'll quickly go over the format so that our audience is aware of it. Jack and I will find 3 of the questions that were posed at the debates. We'll try to stay with the actual topics and issues that you might be interested in. And after our speakers hear those questions, each of them will have 2 minutes to answer. If there is any clarifications that we need, we will ask them about it. They will have a minute to clarify. In case any of them would like to rebuttal or have a clarification request from the other 2 spokespeople, they can raise their hands and they will be given 1 minute for the other to present the question and for the others to answer it. After that section, that's going to be the majority of our questions to our presenters. Jack and I will each try to find 1 or 2 questions, time allowing, that actually was not covered at the televised debates. You probably noticed there were major gaps that were not covered, and we know that there are many issues of importance to our voters. So we will choose some of those areas and ask a question of our presenters. They again will have 2 minutes each to answer those questions. And after that, we will have about 20 minutes, 25 minutes potentially left at the end of our event to open it up to you, to ask your questions, and you may direct them to all three of our presenters or one of them in particular or two if you like. When you do that, we'll call you to line up on the side and have a microphone. Okay, so with that quick introduction, I'm going to actually ask our presenters the very first question that was presented in the televised debate. I particularly wanted to focus on the economy and job creation. The question was, what is your candidate's plan to address our economy, to grow our economy and create jobs? And let's start with our Libertarian representative, please.
First off, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be able to come out to San Jose State and represent Governor Gary Johnson. My name is Robert Imhoff. I'm actually directly with the campaign for Governor Gary Johnson. I'm the volunteer director for all of California. With that said, I will get right to the question itself. What should a president or a party do to help create jobs? And I'm going to answer this backwards. Government does not create jobs in the libertarian's view. We create opportunities for businesses and individuals to create jobs. Governor Gary Johnson is very clear that it is you as individuals, especially as students here at San Jose State, to get your degree, go be an entrepreneur, go start a business. How can you start a business in California, in the United States today, when you have the EDD of California with tons of draconian rules and regulations to get you to even start that business? That you have to have all these special things done as soon as you exceed 50 people in that business. He believes in bringing back some regulations on businesses to help grow the economy by letting the businesses do what they do best and not be spending thousands of people in their companies, auditors, to maintain and manage tax rules, business rules, make sure check boxes are done and money sent to Sacramento, but not money invested in the business, invested in the actual employees to actually do the job. So that's kind of my brief overview, and I'll certainly take any additional questions after that. I'll yield the rest of my time.
So I'm actually a San Jose State University student, and I'm really happy to be here with everyone speaking about this issue. I think the issue of jobs and the economy, which, you know, really both of the major capitalist candidates avoided completely, is a very straightforward question for millions and millions of people in this country. If we were to immediately make healthcare, housing, and education a right, we would actually create millions of jobs. And we could do so at union wages, doing things that are really important, that we really need. I'm also a public school teacher while I'm in school, and our schools are crumbling. We need to rebuild our schools. We need more, not less hospitals. And all of those things take people doing work. We would guarantee that that work is done at a living wage. And the only reason those things don't happen, the only reason that isn't the program of the presidential candidates, is because they are supporting the major banks and corporations that intend to keep a system running where they, a very, very tiny fraction, continue to extract wealth while doing no work. They don't actually do any work at the top of those corporations. The people who do the work are the people who are not being paid or getting laid off when the people at the top don't make enough profit to keep their company going. So we have a very clear plan for creating jobs, and it would boost the economy immediately, and it would be good for millions and millions of people in this country. Thank you.
Hello. Actually, I agree with a lot of what Nathalie just said, and I actually disagree with Robert, because really our economy is not working, whether it's if you look at, I pulled out this chart, which I happen to have. It's about manufacturing production and manufacturing employment in the United States at the current time. And if you can figure out from looking at this chart, manufacturing employment is at an all-time low, while manufacturing production is at an all-time high. So we're producing more with more technology and less jobs. That's the basic problem that we have with our economy. And that's what everybody was blaming Obama for, the fact that the economy's only grown 1% a year recently. It's worse than that all over the rest of the world. The economy's not growing because of the problem with technology in the economy. And so the only solution is one similar. We have a very specific plan. It's called the Green New Deal, because our plan is to not only address the economic crisis that we're involved in, the horrible poverty we have here in the richest country in the world. Here we are in Silicon Valley, and you walk down the street out there, there's people living in tents on the streets in your city, in the richest area in the entire world. And it's shameful. And the reason is because the government's doing nothing. We believe in addressing poverty. We believe in addressing the lack of jobs. We believe in, and we call it the Green New Deal, because we also believe in addressing the climate crisis. We can put people to work. The government, this is where I disagree with Robert, the government, those are real jobs. People create real value when they are cleaning up the environment, when they're building infrastructure, when they're building transit. Those are real jobs, real value, and we need a Green New Deal to simultaneously address climate change and the economic problems that we have.
Thank you very much. Okay, for our second question, Jack.
Yes. Okay, so I heard a lot about immigration during the debate. So my question is simply, what is your plan on immigration, specifically in regard to deportation? So basically Trump's argument is we need a strong border and very strict enforcement. Clinton's plan is to continue the same deferred action programs we've had under Obama, but also keep our border strong and deport more serious criminals. So what is your position on immigration? I guess we can start with Mr. Imhoff and move down the line.
Great, thank you very much. This is a great question. This speaks actually to the heart of Gary Johnson's campaign. Anybody that's been following him knows that he's very pro-immigration. He does not want to build a wall. He understands that there's 11 million people in this great country that are undocumented workers. He, to get a little personal here, he completely flipped out on a reporter when they called them illegal immigrants. And it went all over the news and all over viral that he flipped out. This is how dedicated he is. He was the governor of the state of New Mexico for 8 years. 47% of New Mexico citizens have a Latino background. He always says, you know, you build that wall and you want to deport everybody, what are you going to do? Go house to house, 50% of New Mexico? That's just not practical. His plan is very simple. Nobody gets to jump the line and get citizenship that's already here. However, there's 11 million people here that are undocumented. If we give them an opportunity to just get simple work visas, if only half of them get work visas, that means that that's $19 billion that goes into the federal coffers, money that's not being collected. So all the detractors that say that they're a drain on our economy, you give them a visa, they work. What else means that you give them a visa? It means you can get a bank account. It means that you're not mattress stuffing. It means that you're not a highly susceptible, high-risk individual running around with money. It means that your employer cannot sit there and stiff you or pay you below minimum wage because you have a work visa and you're supposed to be here now. 5 million of those workers, let's talk about them. A lot of them are student visas that have expired. So they got a degree and now we want to kick them out? That doesn't make sense. People had work visas and it expired and now we want to kick them out? They were already here. They were already paying taxes. Now they're not paying taxes. Now they can't be defended by our police officers because they're afraid they'll get kicked out. So that's his positions. Thank you.
I before I say exactly what our positions are, I'd actually like to state that I think the whole discussion around immigration in the capitalist media and also in the past few debates is just so false. It's such a false dichotomy about what's really going on. Because what both candidates stand for is open borders for corporations, open borders when they talk about trade agreements. What does that really mean? It means that the companies and the corporations that exploit other countries, that exploit cheaper labor, that exploit their resources are free to go wherever they please. But then it's the workers that they want to restrict. It's the workers that they want to humiliate. It's the workers that they want to separate their families and put up a border. And no one raises that question. That's a very important question that has real meaning for real people. It's not just numbers of people. It's millions of people. But it's real people's lives. It's what's happening in real people's lives when companies and corporations are allowed to completely and totally gut the corn market in Mexico. And then those people, those very same farmers are forced to leave their families and come to the United States and work in the most humiliating conditions for an economy that depends on them. It's completely false that anyone would kick them out. This economy depends on that exploitation. So we call, for those reasons, for full rights for all immigrants, for undocumented immigrants, for documented immigrants. All immigrants deserve that right, those rights, full rights. Also, we would put an immediate moratorium on any deportations. We see the largest rise in history in deportations. Those would be immediately stopped. People freed from the detention centers where children, families, mothers, fathers, people are living in deplorable conditions. Our candidate herself is the daughter of immigrants, of very hardworking immigrants, and she herself is a very hardworking person, and we've made that very much part of our campaign to go and speak to people who often say, well, I can't vote. No, we say, no, stop. We're talking about this campaign because it goes beyond today. It's about all of us coming together.
Maybe this is a part of the problem of being number 3 here. I agree with these people. I agree with these people over here. But yeah, the Green Party is on record, and we fought for immigrant rights for as long as we've been around. Basically, immigrant rights are workers' rights. Anytime you have a situation where you have a workplace and some of the people are immigrants, some are not, you have to defend the rights of everyone, or you're not going to be able to have a decent workplace. You're not going to have any unity. And the same thing applies. We've got a lot of, we have the 3 minor parties here. We've got a lot of beautiful programs, but none of them are ever going to be implemented unless we can unite our people. If we can't unite our people, we cannot get Medicare for all. We can't get housing for the homeless. We can't get housing for anybody. We can't get union rights. We can't increase the minimum wage. We have got to be united. There's never going to be any unity unless we stand up for the rights of everyone. And if we don't stand up for the rights of everyone, anybody that we leave out, there's these candidates that we saw up here and their representatives and the corporations, we'll go and work with them and organize them against us and against everything that we're fighting for. So we, as working people, we have to work together, and we have to stand up and fight for these things. As far as jobs, a lot of people say that immigrants are taking jobs. What's taking jobs is technology, as I was saying earlier. The only way to increase jobs is to get these government programs. The only way to get these government programs is to unite them. I was in an argument with this homeless guy today. He said, they take care of the women all the time first. They don't take care of the men. If we go down that route and fight over who's going to get these little crumbs which they give to homeless people in San Jose, we'll never get anywhere. We've got to unite.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think when Jack and I talked about a clarification, we're happy about it. Nathalie brought up the concept of trade and what role trade plays in employment and job creation. So we'd like to ask for a 1 minute or a minute and a half comment from each of you on your opinion or your candidate's opinion on past trade deals and the impending Trans-Pacific Partnership, which has been promised to be passed at the lame duck session of Congress. We'll start with Val.
So I think we are the only party out of all of them nationwide that 100% supports TPP. So I think I'm going to be all alone up here. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, it's amongst 17 nations in the world. Mexico and Chile are part of it, even though it implies overseas. What a country is not for it, that would be China. China's the reason why the Trans-Pacific Partnership was developed in the first place. China, you want to buy a solar panel. Solar panels are important. We believe in solar power. We believe in environmental issues as libertarians. But China subsidizes a solar panel 100%. That means when that company comes over here and sells a solar panel for $1, the company made a $1 profit. Now, we don't have any tariffs coming into us. We try and sell a solar panel to China. They give us an 80% tariff on that. What does the TPP do? It says that Vietnam dropped the 35% tariff. Japan dropped the 15% tariff from American goods going to those countries. TPP is not perfect. There's obviously some issues in it, specifically around intellectual property rights and copyrights. We want the rest of the world to have 72-year copyrights and stronger intellectual property rights. Even the Electronic Frontier Foundation is not a fan of this. However, the deal of that versus all the things we get, that means more manufacturing jobs here in America. That means more goods like pencils going to Vietnam, not pencils coming to the United States. That means more jobs here. And it blows our mind that other people don't see the opportunity for TPP to get us rolling. And then we can circle back around and sort out these other issues within it that people have brought up. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I want to, if I can shortly, place TPP in the set of all of the trade agreements, starting with NAFTA in January 1st of 1994, because all of the agreements have had a specific purpose, and they're all structured in the same way. And the purpose is to, like I said, break down those borders and free up multinational corporations that are based primarily in the United States and in Europe, to go into other countries without the protections that they have against those companies. So tariffs are protections against those companies. Union rights, labor laws are protections against those companies and the profits that they can make. And all of those agreements destroy those. They don't create more jobs for us. What they have done, because of those agreements, is the jobs have been taken overseas because all of these corporations do the very same thing all the time. They search for the cheapest way to make what they want to sell. And they sell it at the highest price they can. That's their law. That's the laws of capitalism, right? So they're doing this, and yes, they'll leave the United States to go where they can find cheaper places. They also do it in the United States. They've left the middle part of the country and gone south to where labor laws allow people not to organize. That's what the labor laws say. You don't have the right to organize, so now you're cheaper. They do it everywhere. Those trade agreements are never in the interest of the vast majority of people, of working people. So we're absolutely against them and recognize exactly what they do for people who are already extremely wealthy. I think my time's up.
Yeah, the Green Party is on record as being opposed to the TPP, opposed to NAFTA, opposed to the TTIP for many of the same reasons. Again, one of the things which I strongly disagreed with what Donald Trump said on the thing. He said our trade deals are negotiated by bureaucrats. If you read the WikiLeaks leaks, which actually revealed what was in the trade deals, these were negotiated by the large corporations. These were not negotiated by government bureaucrats. In fact, that's one of the problems, as Nathalie pointed out, is this whole process is being driven by the largest corporations and the largest banks, the same people who brought us the crash here in 2008, the same people who've been destroying our economy ever since. They want to have free rein to continue these policies and make them worse. It's a continuation of NAFTA. One thing I do agree with Donald Trump about, and don't get me wrong, I'm not for him in any way, shape, or form, is that NAFTA was a disaster. Jobs were lost on both sides of the border for the benefit of the large corporations. And so these trade deals are terrible. They're the other thing that they do is they move us further away from a local sustainable economy, which the Green Party believes in. Thank you.
Mr. Imhoff, you have 1 minute rebuttal.
Thank you. So I wanted to point out again with TPP some key issues that were brought up. Human rights violations. If you want to be a TPP country, there are key goals that your country has to adhere to the rights of your citizens, whether that's child labor in Vietnam or that's fair wages in Malaysia, to be a part of this process. As soon as you break those rules, you lose access to TPP. The second thing I wanted to point out was the Chicago Tribune and the Detroit Free Press. Very, very heavy Democrat states and areas. Both support the TPP. Both say that, we're talking Detroit, all the big car companies, all the people that are worried about their manufacturing jobs of making cars leaving the country. That newspaper said yes to TPP. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we would like to move to the third question that was posed at the debates. And this got a lot of back and forth from the two candidates. As you saw, it was about in the topic of foreign hotspots, which I believe is today's code word for war. So I think I'd like to expand on that a bit. We heard from both the Democratic and the Republican candidates that both of them were wrong, and in past policy and going forward, both of them did suggest that having more boots on the ground and committing U.S. military support is called for, but they disagreed on having more boots on the ground. I wanted to ask a question about our general military presence, both between our history and our policies going forward, knowing that our Congress recently passed a $1.15 billion weapons deal to Saudi Arabia, despite very minor objections from some of our representatives, and knowing that Saudi Arabia is clearly and publicly going through bombing Yemen. We know that Yemen will be the next producer of our next wave of refugees, and certainly will create that void that both candidates spoke to at the debate about having happened both in Iraq and Syria. So I'd like to know your position, your candidate and your party's position in terms of our military presence and our interventionist actions going forward in Syria, in Yemen, and Iran, as has been mentioned by both Secretary of State and Donald Trump.
Let him start on that side this time.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I was going to ask if there's any objections. Let's have Sandy start, thank you.
Okay, Jill Stein has called for at least a 50% reduction in our military budget and the diversion of those funds to taking care of human needs here at home. And she's called for establishing a foreign policy based on diplomacy, international law, human rights, and nonviolent support for democratic movements throughout the world. So the basic idea of our policy is, instead of invading countries, which as we did, those candidates were arguing over who supported which invasion the most, and I'm quite sure on my reading both of them supported almost all those invasions. So we believe in reducing the bases. We have bases, 700 military bases in various countries around the world, and we believe in putting an end to that. If we have, to the extent that we have a military at all, it should be more aimed toward defense, and it should be more geared to the National Guard in terms of defending our country. The situation that we've gotten involved in the Middle East is entirely of our own making. We've been meddling in the Middle East since World War II, and actually, well, not so much before then, but since World War II, we've been, our government has been funding Saudi Arabia, funding funding Israel, funding one country after another in the Middle East, and all the weapons we've just sent billions of dollars of weapons into the Middle East, and we wonder why they're killing each other. We invaded Iraq. 1 million people died during the invasion of Iraq, and then we wonder, why do they hate us? Why do they hate us? We went and killed 1 million of their country people, and then they wonder why they hate us. Where did ISIS come from? ISIS is fully armed by the United States. We sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, they siphon it around, and it ends up in the hands of ISIS and a lot of other groups.
Thank you.
So the Gloria La Riva for President campaign actually demands that we dismantle all the bases and bring the troops home. Stop with the Pentagon war machine. There's one element of the Pentagon budget that wouldn't be dismantled, and that's the funds that go to take care of veterans who've been sadly treated. The way the Veterans Affairs Administration is run and the benefits that are given to veterans are far lower than they should be. So that program would maintain. The rest of it, the trillions and trillions of dollars spent on a war, and I think we saw both the candidates sort of raising this xenophobia, this sort of, that's the march to war. This fear that we're all supposed to be afraid of Syria, that we were all supposed to be afraid of Iraq. It came out later there were no weapons of mass destruction, which we knew was a lie at the time. But there's a constant sort of fear-mongering that's supposed to keep us needing some sort of defense. And there is no need for that defense. There is no need for the trillions and trillions of dollars that go into the Pentagon when our schools don't get what they need. When I have 2 students who live on the street, they're 6 and they're 10 and they have to live on the street. They don't have housing. They don't have a proper meal every day. I mean, that's the kind of situation we could solve with the Pentagon budget. It should be dismantled. And the question of diplomacy or sanctions not war is a false question. Sanctions are still war. The idea of supporting democratic movements in other countries is also a form of intervention. It's a form of undermining the people of those countries and their right to self-determination. So we disagree with that position. We do not think the United States should be in the position where it's determining what should be done in Iraq, especially when that destroys a country that provided the things we need here. That's what the situation in Iraq was like before the 2 wars that destroyed it. The last thing I want to say is the National Guard is also a question. What does the National Guard get used for right now? They're sent overseas to fight, and then they're brought back into the cities to repress the movements that are against police brutality. That's how they're being used right now. So we should really question that as well, how that money gets used. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. Lots of passion tonight. And I have to agree with that passion. I definitely have to agree with that passion. Let me first answer a question that I know all of you are probably wondering of me, and I'll do it Jeopardy style. The place where Hillary allowed tens of thousands of children to be killed and maimed and displaced. And the Jeopardy question is, what is Aleppo? So, no, nobody's too serious of a crowd tonight. Thought I was sure to get you guys with that one.
We weren't going to ask.
So, we're definitely in agreement as far as what we call in our party regime change. You can't have regime change. I'm just going to spout a bunch of stuff out to you randomly and explain it in a minute. You know, you have the Kurds, the Sunnis, the Shiites, you have Mosul, you have Raqqa, you have Aleppo, you have Iraq, Iran, Syria. Like, why are we all so well versed in this? We shouldn't be well versed in this. This is not our problem to be well versed in. We should know what the capital of Idaho is, and we're all talking about Aleppo. Interventionalism in other people's problems is not what we should be doing. We've spent $600 million a year on our budget. A majority of that goes towards 35,000 troops in Japan in case something happens to South Korea. That's really why they're there in Japan, if you didn't know. Not just to have a fun time out there and learning about anime. We need to think about when somebody attacks us, we will attack back. We have treaties today. We have to honor those treaties. They might not be the treaties we want, but they're the treaties we have. So we cannot fully dismantle our military as a result of that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I have a clarification for Sandy from the Green Party. So you mentioned that the Green Party would support democratic projects overseas. So Israel is credited with being the sole democracy in the Middle East. Would the Green Party support the Israeli government?
No, no. And I think that whole question of democratic projects, I'm just reading this off the campaign worksheet, and it's there's a lot of so-called, our government does get involved in a lot of so-called democratic projects, which are anything but democratic. They had these, what do they call them, the color revolutions in Eastern Europe, and really these were covers by our government to actually form military alliances with groups in Eastern Europe to surround Russia. And I mean, the Ukraine, they were supposedly, the United States was supposedly supporting a democratic movement there, which then launched a military coup and took over the Ukraine and became an ally of the United States, directed very closely at Russia. So we do not support that kind of so-called democratic movement at all.
Any rebuttal by the other two presenters? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. That concludes us asking you questions that were mostly covered in the debate, in the presidential debate. So Jack and I have thought about some of the questions that we hope are important to you, but they're certainly important to us, and we did not hear them addressed at tonight's debate. So we'd like to each pose one question that we picked for our, well, maybe two. Let's see how we do on time. I'll start with my question. I actually, I'm shocked that this wasn't covered, but I shouldn't be. The overwhelming majority of our climate scientists agree that climate change is a global emergency. With that in mind, what are your policies and plans, your candidates and parties' policies and plans regarding the extraction, use, transportation, and regulation of fossil fuels?
You want me to start?
Sure, let's start with Sandy. You each have 2 minutes for that.
I'll start because our candidate has the best policy on this, which is the Green New Deal, and it's to end all extraction of fossil fuels by 2030. And there's scientists out of Stanford who have said it's completely feasible, completely practical to have a complete transition to fully renewable energy by 2030. And so our candidate's plan, the Green New Deal, is to address that by having this total transition. So we're against oil trains, we're against fracking, unlike Hillary, and Hillary, again, going back to WikiLeaks, you find out that Hillary has two positions on that, a public position and a private position, or a public position and a corporate position, depending on who she's talking to. We believe in ending the pipelines. We're in full support, and people might have seen Jill Stein and got an arrest warrant put out for her support for the tribes fighting the North Dakota pipeline. So we are in 100% support of that. That is the cornerstone of our plan. We agree with Naomi Klein had a book. It was called Capitalism versus the Climate. And we believe in that approach that capitalism is destroying our climate, and we have to have proactive programs to, including huge amounts of government funding to save our climate, or we're all dead.
On that positive note, Nathalie?
Thank you. So the first point in our 10-point program says for the earth to live, capitalism must end. And I think that's true. I mean, the organization of society needs to change so that we can urgently stop the crisis that's happening in the climate. And the way that changes are happening, they're promoted by the way the environment is treated in the military, by the way that consumption and transportation and all of these things are organized in society. If we thought about it for just a second, we need to make all of the changes that have already been mentioned, so I'm not repeating them. But for instance, public transportation would go a huge way to immediately stopping what's happening in the environment. But there's no political will to organize that because there's no profit being made off it in the same way you can make off the crazy amounts of cars that are being sold to families. You know, on my street, I think each family has like 3 or 4, just because there's so many children now living at home because they can't afford to move out, right? But that kind of consumption needs to be reorganized in the interest of the entire earth and people itself. And I just want to add the DAPL pipeline, the Dakota's Access Pipeline, and the issues that are happening there are also related to a recent answer about treaties. If you look at the United States government, the treaties they're always happy to break are with the Native peoples. And that's a continuing issue that's been raised by the Standing Rock tribe. And by all the tribes that are now going on to support this struggle, is the way the earth has been treated, the way people have been treated, they're all linked. And the link that we see is the system, the way it organizes itself. And we can end that. And that's what our campaign's saying. That's why it's so different. We're a socialist campaign. We're the only socialists on the ballot in this state that you can vote for. And that's the first point in our program, is demanding that the climate is protected. We are making the fundamental changes that are necessary so that, like you said, let's say it in a more positive way, so that we all live and that the earth can thrive, right?
So, clarify some things. There was a 2012 National Press Club thing, and Gary Johnson jokingly said that the sun will eventually all engulf the earth, and why should we worry about climate change? It was said in jest, and John Oliver and everybody else kind of went to town on it. I do want to bring up a couple of key things. Since 1972 in the state of New Mexico, now Chevron, then the Mylar Corporation, was polluting the Red River. And New Mexico was fighting hard and hard and hard to get this to stop and get them to clean it up. They did nothing. It took Gary Johnson coming in as the governor of New Mexico and saying, Chevron, you have 30 days to acknowledge that this Red River mess, where all these cows are losing their hair, when they go to feed there, where there's no more trout ponds, where there's no more smelt, that you need to do something. 30 days came and went, and he went to the EPA. Most of you don't realize, if you've heard of Superfund sites, a lot of people in this room are probably educated with Superfund sites. The EPA can't just show up into California and say, that's a Superfund site. The governor of the state, because of states' rights issues, has to say, EPA, I want you to make this a Superfund site. So on April 1st, 2000, and it wasn't a joke, he signed a letter to the EPA and said, that's now a Superfund site. 16 years later, September 16th, 2016, the EPA finally came to a conclusion and to a deal with Chevron to pay over $139 million to clean up the mess in that river. So when we talk about environmental issues, Gary's on par for environmental issues. Fracking, he wants all fracking to suspend as a result of what has occurred in Oklahoma City. So to be quite candid with everybody, his views on fracking have actually evolved. Transportation of things, Yucca Mountain, no Yucca Mountain. States' rights issues. If you don't want it in your state, don't let it transport in there.
Right, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a quick clarification about Gary Johnson's position. Through the past at least 7 years, he's been quite in favor of offshore drilling and also fracking. So now I understand that his position is changing on fracking. How is his current position on offshore drilling and the transportation and regulation of oil and gas?
So again, that issue has also been evolving. As he has said, and this is through his working with Bill Weld through this whole campaign, Bill Weld is very much more pro-environment than Gary is, admittedly. And through those discussions, while he hasn't changed officially his position on offshore drilling, he does acknowledge that in the next 10 to 20 years, everything as far as the use of oil will drop dramatically. The market's kind of figuring itself out on this one. You know, we have Google running around Mountain View every day with the self-driving car. You know, we have Uber in Philadelphia and with my own eyes, seeing it in San Francisco with their self-driving cars. And these self-driving cars are all going to be electrically powered. So for the issue with oil, while he hasn't changed it, he does acknowledge that it's going to be a non-issue. It's going to work itself out over the next 10 to 20 years. Though he does say suspension of fracking until further notice. That is a new issue that's come up since the Oklahoma earthquake.
So his position is the market will...
The market will sort these things out, yes.
Alright, so moving on. Yes, so I know this issue probably deserves a lot more time, but we'll move on, get more coverage. So they did talk about the issue of student debt quite a bit, but I'll frame the question kind of a different way. So what would you do about the over $1 trillion in student debt now? And also, how would your candidates and parties ensure that graduates have access to jobs that will actually allow them to pay back this student debt? And we'll start with Sandy Pay.
Okay, we have actually gotten a lot of people, including people in this room, who came into the Jill Stein campaign out of the Bernie Sanders campaign. And a lot of what drove the Bernie Sanders campaign was his position against student debt. And actually, it turns out that Jill Stein has a stronger position, not only calling for free tuition and free colleging, but actually canceling the student debt completely. It says, we bailed out Wall Street bankers with $17 trillion. It's time to bail out the students. And she's absolutely right. There's no reason we can't do that. She was attacked by John Oliver for her plan for canceling student debt and saying that the Federal Reserve couldn't do that and she can't tell the Federal Reserve what to do. But actually, Jill Stein's, if you read her program, Jill Stein's plan is to democratize the Federal Reserve and to put it under the control of Congress, which is where it was supposed to be. That's where the control of our currency is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be run by Goldman Sachs and by the private banks. Right now, Congress, and this goes back to 1913, Congress handed over its constitutional authority to coin our money and to control our money system to a bunch of banks, a bunch of private banks, which are using their control of money system to enrich themselves. And they enrich themselves to the tune of billions and billions and billions of dollars a year. In fact, our national debt that they were all complaining about between the two major parties, almost all of it goes to these banks, and it's paid to them for coining the money, which Congress is supposed to do. And if Congress coined it, we wouldn't owe anybody. So anyway, Jill Stein believes that the student debt can be repaid, if not by what she calls the quantitative easing, by straight cancellation. It can be repaid through a Wall Street transaction tax. It can be repaid through money from the military budget. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, as a student and a teacher, this is near and dear to my heart. But the campaign calls for canceling all student debt immediately. We also call for free education to be a constitutional right. So education should be free. It should be universal from preschool all the way through university, as far as you might want to go. I'm planning on stopping soon. But that idea is not actually that revolutionary. It's a basic reform that is needed in this society. It's insane to think that people's parents might be paying off their student debt even after they've passed. I mean, that's happening, where those things are being passed on to families in tragic, traumatic situations. That the banks and their need to make profit might somehow trump, for lack of a better word, the idea that education is a part of our society. That people should be educated. That it enhances the entire society to provide people with universal quality education. There are so many things in the educational system in the United States that could so easily be addressed if we really put some time and attention and thought to it. And the way that school reform is being run right now is not in the interest of public education. It's in the interest of undermining that. So the campaign calls for completely reversing that from every level of the educational system. And then a job is also a constitutional right. So you asked about paying it back. You don't have to pay it back. But you also have a job when you graduate, which is huge. So many graduates right now are facing a situation where they have the degrees, but there is no job in the degrees that you're studying for. And that's not right either. We're training people to be part of society. We should offer that position to be part of that society. And so we think those work hand in hand, and they're very, very central to the campaign and to what we've been talking with people all over the state of California. We've gone all over the state in universities and working class neighborhoods to say this, and people respond immediately. Thank you.
All right, so we're a little different than both of those positions. I want to bring up, when we talk about college and college tuition, I want to bring up 1964 in California. A legislative law was passed that guaranteed 90% of all California students an opportunity to go to a state university or a state college, a UC or a state. It's confusing here in California. But in that, and NPR just covered this about 4 days ago, in fact, and then they said very specifically in there, you know, I showed up, I got my degree from UC Santa Barbara, and I left, and I had $3,000 in debt, and that was for other things not directly related to college, and they were able to pay it off really quickly. Since then, the federal government has determined that they want to back loans for your college. So when the federal government says, I want you to have a loan, and I want all of you to have a loan, guaranteed, what do all the colleges do? They raise their tuition. They know that they're going to get the money because it's backed by the federal government. But who's actually paying that loan? You are. If we give this issue back to the states, we don't have to say, you know, you're going to get free education. It's going to come down in costs. California today has 3 different legislative asks that they want to bring forward, but they can't because they're stymied by the Department of Education at the federal level from being able to implement ways for you to get your free education here in California. So the right answer, we believe as libertarians, is to dismantle the Federal Loans Act and to give that back to the states, and then you'll see your costs will be 0 or near 0.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have one question answer. We'll do that quickly so we can open it to audience question and answer. Last year, 2015, was the first year that the majority of personal bankruptcies were the result of medical cost and healthcare issues. So my question is, what are your candidate or parties' policies and plans regarding healthcare as a human right? And what do you think the role of the government should be in providing that?
Can I go ahead and start?
Sure, go ahead.
We'll change it up, Sandy, give you a break from going first this time. So the Libertarian Party and Gary Johnson, and this might not go over well in this room, but we do want to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and that's Obamacare by another name. We feel not that it's not a good idea, that it's not a good idea for the federal government. Libertarians are all about states' rights and keeping the federal government out of your business. Gary Johnson looked at Medicaid and Medi-Cal in New Mexico, and he saw that it was underfunded and we were overpaying. We were pay as you go. You broke an arm, we paid whole retail costs for breaking an arm to whatever hospital you went to. He restructured that deal, and he said, you know, we're more of an insurance, not a just pay as you go. What happened? 20% more people qualified in the state for Medicaid and Medi-Cal. $3 million were actually shrunk from the budget of Medicaid and Medi-Cal. That was able to happen in his state because we were allowed at that time to have 50 laboratories of innovation, 50 different states to come up with 50 different ways to see what makes sense for medical coverage in America. Instead, we had this omnibus plan that was put forth called the Affordable Care Act. And what happened? We all saw it. We lost a lot of our benefits. You know, I went from $10 for prescriptions to $35 for generics. I went from no copay when I go for yearly checkups to $25 for those. This all happened as a result of the Affordable Care Act being this omnibus thing that nobody had any say in. The federal government already made up the decision for the states. What happened? 12 states had to drop out. 2 major insurers said they can't do it anymore. That is not how it should be. I know other people say, well, let's just tax and make it for everybody. We believe that if you give all the states the rights to do that and not the federal government, that's not their business to sort out healthcare. So to answer your question, no, we don't think it's a fundamental right, and for all the reasons I just described. Thank you very much.
Healthcare is a fundamental right. I don't know what else to say. I mean, like I've said for the other issues of education, housing, a job, it's a question of how human beings live. And the way to provide that health care and to lower the costs is to ask, where are those costs coming from? Like, where are those costs coming from? When someone can jack up the price of a single pill, or the EpiPen can suddenly double, triple in price, where's that cost coming from? It isn't coming from some like imaginary place where healthcare just happens. It's coming from the pharmaceutical corporations and the other corporations that are trying to make a profit of whether we're healthy or we're not. And that's the major question in healthcare. And our campaign answers that question. Remove them from that equation. Universal healthcare is also, again, not a particularly revolutionary idea. It happens in countries across the world, where if you need to see a doctor, you see a doctor. Where those doctors are part of a system. And that system is managed and the bids are all done through the government. The single-payer healthcare system. That's the first step that's necessary in this country. It's not going to solve all of the issues. It's not, but it's clearly, there's enough evidence, there's enough research showing that it lowers costs dramatically. And then you start looking at how you can continue to lower those costs, and it's to take those corporations out of the equation entirely. And to think of healthcare as something that is a right, and not a commodity, not a source for someone's profit, who can then go to the healthcare doctor whenever they want because they can afford all the doctors and all the EpiPens. But the rest of us can't. So that's how our campaign looks at healthcare. It's part of a package that are considered human rights and that are very doable when the priorities in the society shift to what do humans need, not do the few profit from.
Okay, Medicare for All, which is what a single-payer system is commonly known as here, was also a cornerstone, and in many respects it was one of the very best planks in Sanders' platform. And it was one which he was viciously attacked by Hillary for, and people who stand up for Medicare for All were called dreamers, and they even hired, I'm sorry, I'm sounding like Donald Trump again. Hillary hired economists to go write editorials against single-payer health care, but that actually is true. Some of Donald's lies, there's a grain of truth to them. That's the way these demagogues work. But at any rate, we believe, almost everything that Nathalie said. Healthcare is a human right. Housing is a human right. Jobs are human rights. Water is a human right. A home is a human right. Basic human needs, the things that we as human beings need to survive, especially in such a rich, wealthy country. And they all go up there and argue about how poor we are, how America's poor, we've got this huge debt, we can't afford to do anything. It's just a lie. We have a distribution problem. I remember the old story about Sitting Bull went to Washington, D.C., and they said, well, how do you like Washington, D.C.? And he said, well, the white man in Washington, D.C. back in his days was somewhat similar to the way it is today. He says, well, the white man sure knows how to create a lot of wealth, but he sure doesn't know how to distribute it. And that's still our problem as a country. We don't know how to distribute our wealth, and we need to change that. Medicare for All is part of that.
And a 1 minute rebuttal from Mr. Imhoff.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that we already seen the effects of universal health care, mandatory health care as a right, as what it's done financially to our country and what it's done financially to ourselves. You know, I was paying $200 a month, and it went all the way up to $620 a month, working for a company. And the reason why was because they said, well, you're paying, we pay you too much. See, if you're making $25,000 a year, we'd give you free. If you're making 50, then you have to pay this much. If you're making 100, if you're making whatever, you have to pay more and more. And it actually told me that as I made more money, that money was being taken away from me for the exact same health care that everybody else in that company was getting. So we can't realistically say that we can financially hold these burdens of universal health care for 330 million people like Denmark can for 4 million people. It's a different scale of economy. It just doesn't scale for these kind of services.
And your response?
Yeah, so we don't have universal health care in the United States, and we have not. So we haven't experienced it. But what we can say is the U.S. government somehow manages to find trillions of dollars to spend for the Pentagon and for other of its priorities at this moment. And they could certainly do that for healthcare. We could certainly have the resources immediately. It's an extremely wealthy country. And it's actually a very well-organized way of delivering something that saves millions and millions of dollars as you move forward. It's preventative health care. You don't get this extreme state of sickness before you go into a doctor. That's why that kind of healthcare is so efficient, is you take care of people before they're extremely sick, before they can't afford an EpiPen and they're nearly dying in their asthmatic attack. That's the question of organizing it. And it's not wasteful, and it doesn't mean you have to take on extra costs. It actually reduces your costs as an individual.
Yeah. I'd also like to add, yeah, the Medicare for All is, see, one of the big myths they have in America is that government is inefficient. Medicare for All is the most efficient form of providing health care, and it's actually, it's a system they have in Canada, it's a system they have all across Europe, and on average, it costs about half per person, half per capita, the cost of what we pay in this country for garbage health care, with all these things that you're talking about. What you're talking about is Obamacare, and I will concede that Obamacare is a mess. The reason Obamacare is a mess is because they cut deals with the pharmaceutical corporations and with the insurance companies before they implemented it. So each of those special interests got a huge cut out of Obamacare, and it's increasing, and the whole plan is beginning to unravel because of that. And none of those problems would be present with a Medicare for All system. I see a lot of my Medicare for All allies, single payer coalition here is in the House. They've been fighting for single payer for decades.
Thank you. All right, so that ends the portion of our moderator Q&A, and now we'll move on to closing remarks. So starting with Mr. Imhoff and moving down the line, you have 1 minute to state your closing remark.
All right, well, I just want to point out what is a libertarian, because there's a lot of misconceptions about this. A libertarian, a John Locke libertarian, a classic liberal, does not believe that the federal government should have too much control over you. It's not saying no control. We believe to a certain degree, it depends on the libertarian you ask, but if you're asking about Gary Johnson, we believe that a certain value of taxation is theft. If you're taxing more than 20% of my income in total, you are stealing from me. So if we don't feel that that money should go to a government, then it can't fund all of these social services. It can't fund free health care, because I get to choose what I want to do with my life. As far as other libertarian values, it's important to point out that your choices in your life are yours and not your government's. You want to smoke weed, you want to marry whoever you want to marry, you want to do what you want on your private property in your private time, that is your business and it's not ours. Our elevator statement is that we're socially inclusive and fiscally responsible. Thank you.
So we are the only socialists on the ballot. Gloria Riva is the only Latina on the ballot, the only worker on the ballot in California that you can vote for. And we're running on a 10-point program, and I've mentioned much of that program, but I really encourage people to check it out on their way out. That includes an end to racist police brutality, an end to the Pentagon budget, and the job, housing, healthcare, and education as a constitutional right. Fundamental shifts in this country. And unlike the two capitalist politicians, both of whom lied enormously tonight, and both of whom won't stand up for regular people, for women's rights in the way we need them to. Our party, the Peace and Freedom Party, and the Party for Socialism and Liberation intends to do that. We're in the struggle for socialism. And beyond November 8th, beyond even January, we're going to continue to organize because we do believe that we need fundamental change in this country, and there's a way to come about that change. And I'd like you to just consider joining us and signing up with us. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the Green Party has a fundamentally different idea of the role of government from the Libertarians, obviously, and just the role of society. We as a society is a collective thing. We all depend upon each other. And so what we need to do, we need to work out our relationships through a democratic process. And the government is part of that democratic process. It's not all gonna be solved by laws of supply economics and supply and demand. And in fact, I think the Green Party more leans toward actually, there's a lot of socialists in the Green Party. The Green Party doesn't use the term socialist, but if you look at our program, it leans in that direction of a heavy government role in solving basic problems of basic human needs, which are not being met by our. We have an economy that's broken. We have an environment that's broken. We have a democracy that's broken. We have a criminal justice system that's broken. And we have got to change completely. The only way it'll change is through people like you getting involved. Unfortunately, these three parties are small, they're minor parties, they're marginalized, they're kept out of the debate. We can't get in these debates, and I thank you guys for giving us a chance to be here. But the only way this will change is when you get involved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gotta be fair.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, yeah.
Actually, I just wanted to remind you all that we are at the end of our panel Q&A, and this is the time that you get to stand up and cheer for your favorite of the excluded party, and join me please in thanking the representatives who've come here to share their time with us. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll open it up to the audience. If you'd like to ask a question, please move up here and I'll hand you the mic.
Can I try this here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Move it around.
Yeah, you can form a line and I'll just hand the mic over. Go ahead, please ask your question. Our panelists, if you'd like to pose it to any particular person directly, they'll get 2 minutes. If you pose them to all of them, 1 minute.
Thanks. So this idea that healthcare, housing, jobs are a human right. If a job is a constitutional right, if a house is a constitutional right, or let's just stick with a job. If a job is a right, why should I not work or make any effort to find one myself? I mean, if I know that something's just going to be given to me, why should I make any effort myself? And so I think this idea, I'm concerned about this idea that socialism sounds like a really good idea, but since we live in such a large country, we don't have that personal connection like we do in a commune, where you're in a tribe and you see heart to heart with someone. So considering that I guess I'll phrase this to you, Robert, since we live in a country that is so large and we don't have that personal connection, If we're just granted things, why are these other two candidates wrong? That isn't that taking away that motivation from people? I'm not saying that there's not problems with the way that our system is, but isn't the problem crony capitalism and not capitalism itself?
Yeah, it is crony capitalism. It's something that the Libertarian Party starts banging its drum all the time and saying, we need to get rid of crony capitalism. We can't be paying $5 for a computer cable at Fry's and $500 for the same computer cable.
We can do 1 minute each.
Okay. For a piece of machinery, for a tank in the battlefield. Why is that so much more expensive? It's crony capitalism. Oh, you have to turn that one off? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks. So, John Locke says that there's nature and there's individuals, okay? We as individuals, if I'm given a job, where is my right to make my decision for my life? We're going to guarantee you a job. Okay, great. I want to be a cook. I'm really good at... No. I guaranteed you a job, not a cook job. I don't care if that's your passion. You have a right to a job, whatever job we decide. You come here to school because you want to get a great degree in the thing that you're passionate about, and you want to take that degree out.
I think the question of motivation is actually a great question because it's often posed. Like, if you have the right to a job, why would you be motivated? Why are you motivated now to go to work? I mean, for millions of people who work in these jobs that are very difficult, that are too long hours, that don't have enough pay, why do you go? You go because you either go or you can't survive. You can't feed your family. You can't do what you need to do. The idea of work in this society is totally different than in one where your needs are provided for, where you do have housing and education and healthcare, where like, my kids won't have clothes if I don't go to school. They won't have childcare if I don't go to work. They won't have a house if I don't go to my work and finish my job and get paid. That question changes work. What does it mean then? What is your motivation if you're able to take your creative energy, which everyone has, your interest, your passion, what you want to be working in, and put it into your work? That's different. That's a different question. That's the kind of question we're posing. Right now, yeah, there's very little motivation to go to work for the people who profit off you. The motivation in capitalist society is what's missing. We're forced to go. Sorry, I gotta grab the baby. She doesn't bring it out.
Okay, there's a basic, in my experience in life, and I've been around here for a few years, maybe more than some of the other panelists here, is that people have a basic drive and a desire to contribute in society. And they have this program here in San Jose, which I do not approve of at all. I do not like it. It's called Downtown Streets Team, and they actually get the homeless to go clean up the city for free. People line up, homeless people who, if you listen to the basic propaganda about them, are bums, no good, drug addicts, and totally unmotivated and antisocial. They line up for the opportunity to go clean up the streets in San Jose for free. So that to me is enough proof that people want to contribute. People want to be part of something. People want to contribute to society. That's in some ways our deepest human passion. So I think that will resolve any problems that come up. There are motivations with people when they don't get respected and they get
Thank you.
okay.
So
people have problems with that when they don't get respected at work.
Thank you. I see we have a few people who want to ask a question. So in the interest of time, will you please direct your question to one of the candidates?
Can you just give them 30 seconds?
Should we do that? Okay, we'll do 30 seconds each for the response.
And most importantly about the downtown streets team, they're cleaning up the creeks as well.
Yeah.
I definitely was never a Republican, and also I left the Democratic Party about 10 years ago after I found out about all the cronyism that goes on and the the exploitation and corruption that goes on in the Democratic Party. But my my values align more with the Green Party and the Peace and Freedom Party. But I'm wondering, you know, I'd love to see even the Libertarian Party, all of you rise up locally, statewide, and federally. What are your plans, feasibly and practicably, maybe they're the same, on being more successful on all levels of government? Because right now, we really need you, and quite frankly, we're not seeing too much success. We're still seeing the old bipartisan politics.
So yeah, we're in a very unique situation where the Libertarian Party is actually on the ballot in all 50 states and in the District of Columbia. And we will be getting across the finish line of 5% across the board. This is a very important thing when it comes to federal finance laws. It means that we instantly get money to run a party convention in 4 years. It means we get funds to help get senators and House of Representatives people to actually put people in these races more competitively. It means we get $20 million. So that's what we're doing. Is you know, we're gonna get federal funding, and all of our down ballot candidates will benefit.
30 seconds. Thank you.
I mean, I'd like to just say the campaign right now has been a pretty incredible run, I think, and it will be for the next 3 weeks. But, you know, people are so disenchanted with both the Hillary Clinton and the Trump campaign that they're paying attention to third parties right now. And I think our party is unique in that it's not just an electoral party. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a struggle. And so we are going to be part of the counter-inaugural demonstrations in January. And we are going to raise the issues of building a movement. And I think that's the question we really need to come down to.
Can you also, for you both, to mention how many states you are on the ballot for, maybe what percentage of voters have access to your...
We're on this ballot in 8 states. I think we're trying for a 9th, but I mean, it's so hard to get on the ballot in 50 states with, you know, no major funding and all that. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, the Green Party's on the ballot in 45 states. I think we've got a write-in deal going in 3 other states. So we're definitely on the ballot, but our percentages are low. They're not as high as the Libertarians. But I really think the direction to go in is actually the one in which you're involved in, this Progressive Elections Forum, is that the alternative parties have got to grapple with the people that are on the ground fighting the basic issues of housing, healthcare, jobs, fighting against poverty, and basic issues of democracy. We need to get with those organizations and figure out a way to really actually form a real progressive alliance which will actually run candidates. They don't necessarily have to be green, don't necessarily have to be, I'm getting a 0. But I think you have part of the solution yourself in this progressive elections movement.
Right on.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you all.
So this is going to be directed at Robert, and I have some notes scrolled here, so I hope it's well formed. Traditionally, the Libertarian Party emphasizes a very big decrease in government services, social programs, things of that nature. And they tend to do an emphasis on market forces and for-profit solutions. I think you said it a couple times yourself tonight. You know, the market will sort of take care of it. And you know, when Gary was governor, as my understanding is he oversaw one of the largest private prison expansions in New Mexico. So the question that I really have is, how do you propose to solve social issues like rehabilitation instead of simply incarceration, where to actually solve the problem would be against the profit or future profits of the private interest?
So yes, check out a Joe Rogan interview with Gary Johnson that was filmed and recorded in May of this year. It's very insightful into the actual, I only got like a minute here, so I have to talk fast. So 2 minutes apparently. So look into that because he actually says, look, we looked at private prisons for New Mexico and we felt that it would work for New Mexico. And the biggest thing that you saw in John Oliver and the biggest thing that the mainstream media tells you is that they're going to want to keep them in there longer, and they're going to want to lobby to get more people in there for longer terms, or get them on gotchas when they're about to get out to renew, and they're about their profits. Well, he changed a third of the state's prisons to private prisons, and there was some bumps along the way. There was those companies that were bad actors. He pushed those bad actors out of the state. He ended up getting more people rehabilitated out of prison. He cut the budget for those prisons that were private, paid a third less than the public prisons. He also got people, he was overpopulating prisons, he had to send them to other states. He was getting people out of the prisons with other things like releasing early, good behavior. Anybody drug related, got them out early. So he's pushing them back out. And also, as far as the prisons are concerned, sure, go ahead.
So it sounds to me though like you're saying that really the government had to intervene in the market solution. Right?
Well, it's creating a market, right? When it says it wants a private person to be there, it just created a market.
In order to solve the problems of the private prison system, the government had to intervene. Him as government. That's government.
Well, it's a good and a service, right? The good was prisons, and the prisons were not doing what they were supposed to. So why are we going to pay for a prison? We asked you to do a job, you didn't do it well. We booted you out. We got another one in. They did it correctly. We saved money.
I'm sorry, everyone. I really have to go. I have a 6-year-old I have to pick up.
Thank you very, very much for being here, Nathalie. Thank you. And thank you for this young voter for being here.
In talking about foreign policy, the major party candidates were mostly looking at the Middle East and the discussions here about the U.S. not intervening in the various less developed, chaotic places, but haven't really talked so that neither of them really, and you guys here so far, haven't really talked about how the United States should deal with the other major powers in the world, which aren't the superpower the U.S. is, but like China, Russia, Germany, and the EU, and so forth. What and how should the U.S. look at those countries, and what, if anything, should they be doing?
Okay. Again, our basic foreign policy is diplomacy, international law, human rights. It's to deal with countries on that basis. We don't believe that we need to have a war. We don't believe we need to surround Russia, as the major parties do. We don't need to believe that. That, in my opinion, is a lot of what the Middle East is about. In addition to oil, it's about relationships with Russia and China and attempts to isolate them politically and surround them not only politically but militarily. And so the same thing we said before, bring back the troops from these 700 bases all over the world, bring them back here. Stop intervening in areas all over the world, because we also do it in Southeast Asia, in South Asia, and Japan, Korea. We need to stop it.
All right. Next question.
Hey, mine also.
I think you wanted me to respond to.
Oh, I see. So we'll do 30 seconds.
That was those 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds.
Again, we have treaties, and a lot of people think of treaties like, wait a minute, Robert, are you trying to say that Gary's supporting these war treaties? No, we have treaties like the Paris Treaty, the Hague, everything that surrounds the Hague, right? International law. So we have to interact with other countries. We have to trade with other countries. We're not an isolationism society. So if we want to interact with Japan, then we have to have treaties with Japan. If we want to do business with South Korea, then we have to do business. We also have to look really strongly at places like China, who, somebody was murdered and you were nearby, so you're guilty of it. That's what they say in half the situations. Well, I wasn't there, it wasn't really me, there's enough evidence, right? Let me finish that sentence. So I'm guilty, you're guilty because we need somebody to be guilty, and we need to fight against stuff like that.
So I'm a highly educated, very poor person, and I was wondering if, and I don't have a TV, so I didn't want to watch those debates, but I do listen to 94.1, and so I'm fairly informed, and I'm also have a lot of people that have been helping me to get educated about this politics. My question about all the broken systems is, do you also feel that, I didn't hear anyone talking about how about mentally ill subjects, and how we're right now housing them in the jails, and do you feel that's a broken system?
Do 30 seconds each.
It's definitely a broken system. Michael Tyree was killed a year ago in the jail in San Jose. He was killed because he didn't, he had actually was released from jail, but because he didn't have a home, they kept him overnight, and that was the night he was beaten to death. It's completely broken. We believe in health care for everyone, to take care of everyone's need, and we believe in housing for people with mental illness. Right now, people are just dumped out on the streets.
We agree largely. The mentally disabled need help. They certainly need help. They need to be interacted with police in a manner that's becoming of an officer of the law. They can't be just slammed in there. And you know, we a lot of people don't remember this. Even this was before my time, but certainly interacting with a lot of law enforcement in my life. You know, they used to use thumb cuffs as a part of humiliation, and thumb cuffs were cutting off the circulation of people, and they were dying in custody with thumb cuffs. We don't do thumb cuffs anymore. You know. But it's a states' rights issue. It's not a federal government's job to figure that out. It's California's job.
Last question.
All right, and this goes back to foreign policy, and I'm going to direct this to you, Sandy. In my eyes, scaling back the military to the amount you've suggested and closing all the military bases would have a destabilizing effect on the world. For example, if we didn't have our troops stationed in Japan, I think it would be much more likely that North Korea would invade South Korea. Don't you think that's a legitimate danger to think about?
No, I think the reason North Korea might invade South Korea is because we've been involved in that area militarily, and we've threatened them for decades. And I think if they were not so concerned that they themselves would be invaded, I think we would be in a much better shape. I think our military presence around the world is not a stabilizing presence. It's all of these bases which are destabilizing the entire world, in our opinion.
Oh, was it just directed to him, or?
Oh, if there's time, then I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Sure. Have a quick seat there. All right. Yeah. Again, interventionism. You know, I think, and I'm speaking for Gary Johnson here. Gary Johnson feels day one, deschedule marijuana. Day two, pull up the stakes. We're out of Iraq. We're out of Syria. You know, Syria was destabilized on its own by its own rebels. We backed the rebels. It stayed destabilized. It stayed destabilized. ISIS came around. If we didn't back the rebels in the first place, if we didn't persist on nudging them into an Arab Spring that failed, then it would have gone back to Assad. We'd have all agreed that he's doing a bad job. People would still be alive. Bottom line. So, you know, yeah, we can't be, it's not our job. Like they said, we got too much stuff going on at home to be sorting out other people's problems.
All right, I believe that concludes our debate. Thank you again to the participants. Thank you, Scott. And really thank you all for staying 3 hours, very long time. And I believe Shrad has some closing